From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
And now, I'm very pleased to introduce the next author. You've seen lots of good authors today. Well, Anita Silvey knows all about good children's books. She served as the publisher of children's books for Houghton Mifflin and as the editor of the Horn Book, which is the magazine about children's literature. Her books include 100 Best Books for Children and 500 Great Books for Teens. Her latest book is Everything I Needed to Know I Learned from a Children's Book, which seems pretty true. And she's currently working on the Children's Book a Day Almanac, as well as an illustrated biography for children called Henry Knox, Bookseller, Soldier, Patriot. She has said, only the very best of anything can be good enough for the young. Lucky for the young, Anita Silvey is one of the best. Please join me in welcoming Anita Silvey.
Thank you. Do I have any book lovers out here? Do I have any book lovers? This is for book lovers. You know, we talk about joie de vivre, V-I-V-R-E. It's joie de livre at this event. Okay, it's joy of books. And I must admit, as I was in a little go-kart, and you know, I was coming from the Capitol going to the monument, and I sort of had a heat hallucination, and I was wondering, you know, thinking about how I got here. And I am somebody who had a lot of detours on my way to being an author. And for those in the audience, you know, if you think you're in detour, I can only tell you my story. In 1970, I arrived in Boston, and I wanted to teach, and I couldn't find, no one would hire me. And at that point in time, there was an opening in the children's book department at Little Brown and Company. And I said, oh gee, if I can't teach kids, wouldn't it be fun to work on books for them? It was sort of like Citizen Kane. He says, oh, I think it would be fun to run a newspaper. You know, it just, and with that spirit, I walked into the children's book department, and I fell in love right away because I was making books. I was creating books. And I spent the next 32 years helping other people make books. And my dream was that someday I could make my own. And in 1995, I finished my first reference book for children. It was called Children's Books and Their Creators. I was publisher of Houghton Mifflin when it came out. And I remember the day that it arrived. And by the way, I started big and have gotten smaller, and I recommend that too. Okay, you know, do your ambitious project first and then get smaller. It was 800 pages. You know, it's a great doorstop. You know, it really is. I used to say it was the cheapest book in the industry for its weight. It weighed around 3 pounds. And when I saw that book and I held it in my hands that night, I just broke down sobbing. And I said, this is what I've always wanted to do, and I've got to find a way to do it. So I saved a lot of money, and in 2001, I took that vow of authorship: perseverance, determination, poverty. All right, that is the author's vow. You have to be willing to go the distance, not to worry about money if you want to do what you want to do. And so I have now had about 10 years of writing books, both for children and writing. What I love to do is I love to write about children's books. And 5 years ago, one of my best friends in publishing called me up. It was a cold winter's day. It was so far from this that it amazes me to think about it. And she said, I'm going to run a title by you, and I'm going to run a concept. And she said, the title is Everything I Needed to Know I Learned from a Children's Book. And the concept is that you're going to interview 100-some people, none of whom you know or who necessarily want to talk to you, about the children's book that influenced their lives. And we're going to choose these from among the leaders in society. And I believe that it took me a fraction of a second to say, you've got me, I'm on board, I would love to do this. Because everywhere I go and every place I talk to people, one of the things I always ask people is, what did you read as a child? And what do you remember about it? And who gave it to you? And so I began, I want to say, it was easily the happiest 2 years of my creative life. setting up interviews with people. My editor and I came up with a list. We came up with a list of the 500 people in the United States that if we could get interviews with them, that's who we'd want. And I began person after person after person to try to talk to them and to try to hear what children's book had affected their lives. And it was an amazing experience. You know, I'd wake up in the morning and the first thing I'd think of is this the day I talked to Julianne Moore? Is it Kirk Douglas today? Who am I? Who's on docket today? And I began to have this series of interviews with people that changed me and changed the way I look at books, because I always would have told you that I think books have profound influence, but I never realized what that influence was. I never had the evidence. One of the things that people often ask me is they often say, what was your biggest surprise in the interviews? And I have to say, I was talking to Kirk Douglas, by the way, had just turned 90, and I'd been led to believe that he loved Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel. And so I was preparing for a Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel interview, and he picked up the phone and I gave him the title of the book, and he said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, "The book I want to talk to you about is the Bobbsey Twins." And I said, "Oh, you've got to be kidding." I think I laughed, you know, because I was so unprepared for that. And I said, "Well, why the Bobbsey Twins?" And then he told me, and it made perfect sense. He said, "My family was an immigrant family. My parents did not read English. My sister was the first person to read, his sister Betty." And he said that was her favorite book. And when I was a little boy, she sat me on the couch and she read me the Bobbsey Twins. And he said, because of the Bobbsey Twins, I learned to read. And if I had not learned to read, I would have had no career as an actor. And those were the kinds of testimonies again and again and again. You know, it's not only people who love books who are affected by them. It's everyone who reads a children's book. The dancer Edward Villela said, "I only think I read one book as a child, but I remember it as if it were yesterday." And the book that affected him, not surprisingly, is The Little Engine That Could. He was a man, a testimony to overcoming things, as was, by the way, the sportscaster Tiki Barber. That was his favorite book as a child. I was shocked to find out how many people chose careers based on children's books. I would not have thought that. I would not have thought that you pick up a book, you read it, and you know what you want to do for your life's work. And yet again and again, people gave me that testimony. David McCullough, the historian, said that when he was age 9, he met his first alternate historian in a book by Robert Lawson called Ben and Me. And he said, I knew from that book on that I wanted to write history in just as exciting a way as Robert Lawson could write it. Robert Kennedy Jr. picked up a book when he was around 9 or 10, and it was Jean Craighead George's My Side of the Mountain. And he was so taken with this book, and for those who know the book, by the way, there's a young boy in there who becomes a falconer. And so Robert wrote to the author, Jean Craighead George, and basically the letter read something like, I want to get a falcon. Can you give me any lines that I can use on my mother Ethel to get her to give me one? Okay, so he wrote to his favorite author. Evidently, Jean gave him the justification that his mother needed, and he got a falcon, and he said that working with a falcon led him to a career in environmental law and in preserving the wilderness. And he said, when I went to school, all of the kids in my class all admitted that the book that had the most profound effect on us was My Side of the Mountain. And by the way, the beauty of that, by the way, Jean Craighead George just turned 90 this year, and the beauty of that is that later on in their lives, they came together, and he was able to tell her that story. And so I was able to record it for the book, which was a wonderful thing to have. Robert Ballard, who raised the Titanic, Anyone want to guess what his favorite book was? Absolutely, 100,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He said, I'm a modern day Captain Nemo. And he went to his parents and he said, how do I get to do this? And they said, you need to pursue a degree in oceanography. And he said, so I went and I got a degree. And then I asked them how I do other things, and they told me other things to do. And as he says in his essay, all children have dreams. And what we need are adults to tell us that we can live these dreams, that we can have these dreams. I wasn't surprised. I've always said that children read for two things. They read for character and they read for plot. And so there were a lot of people who talked to me about their favorite character out of children's books. For Judy Blume, for writer Judy Blume, that character was Madeline. And she so loved the Madeline books that she hid the one from the library under her pillow so her mother would not return it. And so if you were in Judy Blume's librarian, she's sorry, but she never did bring it back. She said, I now know that my mother might have bought it for me, but I love that book too much to give it up. There is one character out of fiction that has probably influenced more people than any other: Simone de Beauvoir, Julianne Moore, Hillary Clinton, Judy Woodruff, Bobby Ann Mason, and that is from Little Women. Jo Marsh has had a profound effect on generations of women. And one of my favorite stories came from country western singer, heartthrob Brad Paisley, who had a baby about 2 years ago, and he and his wife were in disagreement about how to name the baby, because Brad Paisley wanted to name the baby after his favorite character in children's books, and his wife clearly didn't want to. Okay, so they argue throughout the hospital stay, and eventually on the way home they have to make a decision. And so Brad Paisley said, I got the certificate and I wrote on it the name of my son. And he said, I kept the pen because I wanted to give that pen someday to my son and say, with this pen, my favorite author wrote a book, and with this pen, we gave you a name based on that book so that you can have it. And hence we have in this world William Huckleberry Paisley. All right, so Huck Finn is alive and well in the Paisley family. Some of the interviews were absolutely spectacular. I think I had two favorites, I must admit. I'm in love with Pete Seeger. I just admit it outright. I don't hide it at all. And I spent 2 hours on the phone with him, and he sang to me while I was on the phone. He sang me his favorite songs from childhood. I couldn't record that, but it was a wonderful interview. But I had one of the last interviews with the painter N.C. Wyeth. And he had painter Andrew Wyeth, the son of N.C. Wyeth. And his staff had been protecting him, and I didn't realize that he was so sick. But when we got on the phone that day, he started to talk about his father's legacy to him. And he said when he was a little boy, his father put him on his lap, and he read Treasure Island to him, and he showed him the images that he was creating. And Wyeth said, the day that I saw the image of blind Pew groping down the row in Treasure Island, he said that was the day that I knew I wanted to become an artist. He said, my father passed on the idea of creating art to me. Other times, it's a single line in a book that people remembered. Jay Leno's favorite book was Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, and the line that he loved from it was the line where it says, the harder Marianne dug, the more people who came, the harder and faster Marianne dug. And Jay Leno said, I was always a show-off, and I realized that the more of a crowd I had, the more of a show-off I was. William DeVries, here of Walter Reed, by the way, in this city, is the first doctor to insert the artificial heart. And his line that he had remembered, he said, I have remembered it every professional day of my life as a doctor. And it was a line from the book his mother gave him. It was Wizard of Oz. And it is the line where the Tin Woodsman said, I would bear all the unhappiness in the world if only I had a heart. And he said, I have carried that line with me through everything that I've done. The testimonies were testimonies about family, about sharing books with children that had been shared with them. Scott Simon of NPR talked about his new Chinese daughters that they had adopted. And when he's away from them, he reads Goodnight Moon on the telephone to them at night. And he said, we always fall asleep under the same moon. And Linda Johnson Robb, of LBJ's daughter, gave one of the loveliest testimonies. Her mother and a woman named Seal Marshall were college roommates. And as Linda said, Seal's little boy, Jimmy, went on to create children's books. That is, of course, James Marshall. And he did the classic Miss Nelson is Missing. And so Linda said, we got those books as a child. We shared them with our children. And she said, they're on my shelf right now for when we have grandchildren, and we will pass them on. And she said that books tie the generations of my family together. When I touch this book, I'm with my mother, I'm with my own children, I'm in my own childhood, and now someday I will pass that on. And that is really what great children's books do. But I have to say that the thing that was remarkable of every one of these interviews, people would say to me, you'll remember the name of the author, I've forgotten it. But I remember the name of the person who gave it to me. They're very important people. They remember the name of their second grade teacher, the public librarian or the school librarian that handed them the book, the parent, anyone who gave them those books. All of these memories were not just a memory of a book. They were memory of the book and the person who had brought them together. And as they talked about this, I have to say that their voices got softer. My first interview was with Steve Forbes. I was terrified of him. He's been known to eat the press for lunch. And when I said to him, did you like reading as a child? He said, I hated to read as a child. And I thought, oh dear, this isn't off on a very good foot. And what are we going to do? And then he said, but you know, I loved being read to. And my mother would take me in her lap, and she would share books with me. And suddenly his voice got very soft, and he became a young boy again. And it was a totally different interview as he talked about what his mother had done for him, sharing books with him. So for those of you who are passing on books to children, you are becoming part of their best memories. You are becoming part of what makes them a human being, and you are giving them something very precious and something very vital to remember. It will take the children in your life a long time before they'll tell you this, and they maybe can't tell you this. But I'm really here today because what I hope is that all of you will find at this glorious festival some great children's books to pass on to your children. And someday, hopefully if I live long enough and I don't stay in too many heat waves like this one, I have a better chance of it. When I'm interviewing them, they will be able to tell me about a book that you put in their hands, of something you gave them, of something you passed on to them, because you remembered to make sure to get the right book for the right child at the right time. And that is what my book is all about. Thank you so much, and I'd love to hear from all of you. This is your chance to ask questions, to tell me and somebody's going to, I hope, tell me your favorite books and whatever you want to know. All right.
I was wondering, what children's book or line was it for you that really inspired you?
What book was it for me? I have to say, give me an age and I have a different book. But I will tell you the one that's the most important to me over time. And it sits right next to my desk. And it was purchased by my mother's great aunt. She was born in 1865 at the end of the Civil War. She read it, she inscribed it to my mother passed it on to me, And every time I touch that book, all the women in my family are there, and that's Frances Hodgkins Burnett, The Secret Garden. And that is still, to this day, I must admit, it's my favorite book. What's your favorite book? That's what I want to know.
I have a lot. I probably can't decide.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, yes.
I'm with you on The Secret Garden. That and Anne of Green Gables are my two favorite.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of an aspiring children's book author, and the book I've been working on for some time doesn't really fit a category, and I keep hearing things like, unless you show a character growth, unless you do this or do that, your book won't be published. And I guess I'm looking for some kind of comfort that as long as the book is good enough that it will have a shot at being published.
Yeah, you're going to hear that from me, because one of the things that this is the sense of writers. There are a lot of rules for writers, and if you go to conferences because you can learn things, they'll give you all those rules for writers. And the only thing that's true of rules for writers is they're meant to be broken. Almost every single classic that we have for children breaks the standard convention of the day. But what the author had to have was a willingness to persevere. So we know, for instance, Dr. Seuss is our most rejected classic writer. He was rejected somewhere around the range of 25 to 27 times. And people didn't like him because they didn't like rhymed verse, and nobody published rhymed verse at that time. And he didn't have any morals or messages, and everybody was publishing very message-laden books. And one day, after his 27th rejection, he was walking down the street, and he ran into an old Dartmouth classmate, and he was singing his tale of woe. And that classmate said to him, "This is really quite wonderful, you know. They've just made me the children's book editor at Vanguard, and I'm going to publish your book." And Seuss said, "Yes, but I've just told you everyone's rejected it. Don't you want to read it?" And his friend said, "I wouldn't know a children's book if it bit me by the ankles, but I need one and you have one, so we are on board." And he gave him a contract that day. Okay, so persevere, write what you need to write. Listen to people, listen to feedback, but write the book you need to write, because that's the most important book. I absolutely encourage you with that. That's how we get great writers. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, over here.
Yeah, my favorite book, E.B. White, because it's
Evie,
Charlotte's Web.
Charlotte's Web. And how did you find it?
My father bought it for me, and it's the first book he ever bought for me, so that's why I remember it. Anyways, my question for you is, what's something to really remember and consider when recommending books to reluctant readers?
Recommending books to reluctant readers, first of all, get help there, in your local library. They know what's working in that area. We just have Jeff Smith here. One of the things I say is graphic novels are books. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Jeff's books. These are making great strides with reluctant readers. So don't judge the kind of literature, just get them something that engages them. And there are, for each age group, I think a good librarian or good bookseller could give you something that we know is working. But it's important to honor their taste, not to put our tastes on top of it sometimes. Sometimes all they're reluctant to read is what we want them to read. They're not reluctant to read the books that they find exciting. I have parents say to me, "Oh, my kids only want to read information books. How do I stop them?" And I say, you don't stop them. You give them more information books to read. So, people get going again. J.K. Rowling turned people back into readers. Jeff Kinney is turning people back into readers. Stephanie Meyer has turned teenagers back into readers. We've got a lot of great people going now. So just don't give up with it. All right. And I'll have another question here.
I personally like reading by myself best, but do you like someone reading to you or you reading by yourself?
Oh, do I like, if anybody reads to me, that's a real privilege. And, people, as you get older, they don't, but I love to listen to tapes where people read. But I just like to curl up with a book, I always have. I did when I was your age, and I do now. And either way, it's great. If they read to you, it's great, or, if you read it, it's great. So just keep doing it. Let's keep doing it. Thank you. All right, over here.
Hi, I also am writing for children and heard what you had said to the previous person here. But what about publishing on your own? I know more and more people are trying to do that. What advice can you give? And then I'll tell you my book.
Okay, one of the things that I teach publishing in the Simmons, I even have former students here. It's hard to believe they'd come to hear me again. But anyway, one of the things I say to my students, I believe that publishing on your own is becoming more and more legitimate. All that is needed is a review source that would actually review those books, and we would be in a whole other place with them. So I know so many success stories of people who just didn't want to beat their heads against the brick wall anymore, went and published their book on their own. There are some good places to do it through, like iUniverse, that help you with the process. And you know, if the book works, you can always sell those rights to publishers. So it's not I'm published on my own and I'll never be able to have another go at it. So I think we're just at that time period where we're going to see more and more and more publish on their own, and then publishers will pick up some of the more successful books. So don't write it off as a possibility.
Okay, thank you. And my favorite book, it's very old, see the grays, is Sally Goes to the Circus Alone.
Oh, okay.
It's very, very old, but
Yeah.
spunky little girl who managed to go off on her own, and
Oh,
I'm just attached
and
to
go
that.
to the circus, yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to go to the circus right now, an air-conditioned circus. All right. Yes, somebody over here.
My question is, who was your mentor when you were like in your childhood?
I'm sorry.
Who was your mentor?
Who was my mentor? In publishing, I never this is an honest story. I left publishing when I was 53 years old, and I never had a mentor. And I had bosses, but they were sadistic. And no, I mean, they were my bosses, you know. They got a lot of work out of me, but they were never they were never mentoring me. And at age 54, I edited the book of Hal Miller, who was the former CEO of the company that I worked for. And I got my first mentor at the age of 54. And he is now, by the way, he's 87, and I tell him he's got to keep hanging in because I can bring to him all those questions as a writer that I need. So as a writer, I've had a mentor, but as somebody in publishing, I never had one. So, you know, it's never too late for a mentor. You know, it's also never too late for a happy childhood, as we all know. So thank you. That's a good question. Yes.
I'm a school counselor, and I'm always using books to, encourage the children. And I read your book, The 100 Best Books for Children, and I agreed with a lot of them. And there's one that wasn't in there I was going to email, but now I can tell you.
Okay.
I think it's called The Five Chinese Brothers.
Oh, yes.
And I love that, and I was surprised it wasn't in there.
Yeah, when you only have by the way, 100 Best Books for Children was the most sadistic book that I ever did because I love to do 800 pages, and 100 was just too short. And so I had to leave out so many great things. I believe it's in the reading list, but I just had to leave out so many things. Thank you very much. Okay, one more question, I think.
I grew up reading Mary Poppins.
Oh, a
Great
good
British, all these stories from other countries. I am also a great aunt to boys growing up in sports-oriented homes, as well as academic homes, but sports. So it is a challenge to not give them what I want, but what they would enjoy.
Yes, yeah. To remember when the mantra is the right book for the right child at the right time, and that is honoring the child. That is very important to do in all reading. We honor who they are as human beings. Okay, thank you. Am I at one more question? I think we have one more. Quick one.
Hi, I was wondering, I have a question about what your advice would be for inspirational writers who would like to pursue writing as their job, but considering what the competition is for trying to publish a book.
Yeah, one of the things that I say to all writers, write what you have to write. Look every now and then at what's published, but don't get consumed by it. Find your own voice. Find what you have to say. Keep going. Perseverance is everything. Okay, so just keep doing it. And there's that voice that's always going to say, they don't need my book. They don't need me. I have nothing to say. I am insane, in fact, to be doing this in my pajamas at whatever hour, 3 in the morning. Okay, that voice is always there. Don't give in to it. Keep writing what you need to, because, what I finally realized is I could do books about what I loved, which was children's books. that had never occurred to me. So just keep going. That's always my advice. Keep going. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.